Welcome to the Alien Probe Podcast. It is Sunday, May 21st, 2023. I'm Doug. Joining me again today is Deb. How's it going, Deb?
It's going great.
How was your week?
Pretty quiet. Went to a haunted castle yesterday.
Yeah, we didn't get to do the tour, though, because we went to the craft show.
Yeah, we went to the basement but we saw some nasty parts of a haunted castle that was a home for wayward boys of some
Yeah,
kind.
1894.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of freaky. I don't know. It's creepy. It was creepy.
We're going to do the tour soon.
So today we're going to join again with journey to the secret journey to Planet Serpo. Deb is, we know, as whoever's listened to this ongoing through the 140 episodes, Deb's not a huge UFO ET fan, but I try to drag her into our world.
I'm learning about Planet Serpo.
We're
I'm learning as we go.
So we've done episode 1 through 3, and I can see, and thank you for those of you that are following through the journey. I'm hoping that you look forward. We don't do them every week, but we try to do the update. Was that a dog?
That was a dog sneeze.
A dog sneeze. So, this is part 4. So if you want to get caught up, listen to parts 1 through 3. We're having a good time. We're kind of following the book, interjecting some, commentary and things as we go along. So we'll get right started. We'll get started, right? President Kennedy gave the official directive for the Eben Exchange Program. The date for the alien landing had been previously set for April 24th, 1964, and the landing site was to be at the western border of Holloman Air Force Base, adjacent to the southern entrance to White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico.
It was originally planned to be only a diplomatic visit, during which the aliens would also retrieve the bodies of the 9 dead victims of the 2 New Mexico crashes, as well as the body of EBE-1. But President Kennedy decided to request that the event become more of an exchange program.
Yeah, this request was communicated to the Eben home planet and was approved by them around September 1962. As noted earlier, the exchange program idea was originally put forth by EBE-1 in his 5th message in 1950 through 1952. EBE is extraterrestrial intelligence.
Is it being?
Yeah, extraterrestrial being.
Being?
Yeah, EBE. Extraterrestrial being, EBE. Anyway, in his 5th message in 1952.
In a reply directly to him, the Ebens agreed to a return visit, but did not mention an exchange program. They suggested a date 10 years in the future. Well, you don't want to exchange too soon.
No.
This reply may have suffered from EB1's translation. Oh, that's right, because he was more of a mechanic as opposed to, okay.
Yeah.
EB's translation, and the military handlers at Los Alamos first believed it to be a mistake. Yeah, because 10 years seems like a long time to wait to exchange your prisoners.
Well, not the prisoners.
Okay. Yeah. The willing participants.
The willing, and this is, I'm assuming everybody listened to the first first 3, but, we're going to have 12 volunteers, quote unquote volunteers. They're volunteers that are going to come from Earth to go to Serpo in the Zeta Reticuli system, and then for 10 years and then come back. But before they could could obtain a correction, EBE-1 had died, so that date 1962 remained until the new one in 1964 could be established in 1955 via Eben communication.
As it turned out, the new date was really 12 years in the future from when EB1 had received his reply. Now, in 1962, when communications were much improved, Kennedy realized that the exchange request might now receive an approval, and it did.
It was agreed that we would send 12 American astronauts to the alien planet, and they would leave 1 Eben ambassador here for a period of 10 years.
Oh, so kind of like, we're keeping one so that we know we get ours back.
Yeah.
Since the planned date of the landing couldn't be changed without great difficulty, that meant that the government planners had only about 18 months to select, train our ambassadorial team.
So then it was very tight schedule for such an unprecedented and complicated program. The selection process alone could easily involve a 6-month effort. And you know, when you're dealing with the military and we have to agree on anything.
Government.
Yeah, the government alone. Yeah.
Nothing gets done quickly.
Exactly.
While President Kennedy had placed the entire program in the hands of the Defense Intelligence Agency, this did not preclude the use of civilian subcontracting agencies. However, it was quickly decided that the Air Force would be the lead agency taking responsibility for finding 12 volunteers for this historic mission.
And that would be fun.
Oh, yeah.
And it's extraterrestrial biological entity. I'm sorry, I should have known that.
Oh, you definitely should know that.
Like, wait a minute, I should have known that.
We probably said that in the first episode.
We did, but then I have to, again, people aren't, they're EB, what's that? The Air Force brought in civilian consultants to help with personnel selection and mission planning. Interestingly, NASA, which became operational in October 1st, 1958, had no involvement in the mission.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's a reason.
Okay. Under the terms of the National Aeronautics and Space Act of July 29th, 1958, NASA was to be the official government agency charged with space exploration. And since they had fully absorbed the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, so many committees.
Yes.
They had already had a 46-year history of space research that could certainly help to expedite the program planning and preparations.
NASA.
NASA.
National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. Yeah, NASA is a civilian. They may mention this, I won't mention it twice, but the NASA charter specified that it remained non-military. Yeah. So while the DIA, and we remember from the previous episode, DIA is the agency that Kennedy came up with because the CIA wasn't giving him all the data that he felt they should be. So they were holding back because we all know the CIA is pretty much more powerful than the government. Yes. So, however, as will be seen below, NASA did participate in training the team.
Okay. The appointed Military Civilian Selection Committee debated for months about the criteria to be applied in choosing the team members. This was, of course, precious time lost because, it's government. It was finally decided all candidates must be military, but not necessarily from the Air Force. Well, they made one decision. Look at there.
Yeah.
A whole decision.
This is a common theme with the government. There were to be no civilian members of the team. They had to have chosen the military as a career and had to have completed at least 4 years of service. And I think that's good.
Yeah, that's
a good starting point.
This decision made a lot of sense. The mission required an ultra-high level of personal and team discipline, since the team members would be facing enormous hardship, and they would have to rely on that discipline to handle the challenges.
As previously discussed, Kennedy and the DIA were not absolutely certain that they would not be facing a possible threat from the Ebens. They wanted people who could defend themselves and could possibly even find a way to return to Earth by force if it became necessary. And that's a nice thought, but we have to remember what we're dealing with here. And you're just going to, like a movie, shoot your way out of there and steal a spaceship.
Like Tom Cruise. So stealing a plane.
Yeah.
And the enemy's plane and flying it back home.
Yeah, just randomly. I've never seen this before. I'm not checked out on this aircraft, and I'm just going to start flipping toggle switches and things.
And aim for home.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Where's home?
Yeah, you don't have a clue you don't know where you are, where you want to go.
Freaking Lost in Space episode.
The committee would be looking for individuals with special skills appropriate to their roles in the mission, who had additionally been cross-trained in other needed skills. Also, they wanted some evidence that each team member had the ability to step into the shoes of another member if necessary, because, people are going to die.
Redundant systems.
Yeah.
Yes, because you have a limited amount of personnel and it's 10 years. And these guys, although they're not old, they're not young. So, things happen. The team members had to be currently unmarried. Presumably, this requirement did not eliminate those previously married, but they could not have any children.
Divorced people were okay.
Yeah. Preference would be given for those who were themselves orphans. I'm in.
The goal was to select candidates with as few family ties as possible. Yeah, that's the fewer people that know this is even happening, the better, obviously. Apparently, there was a concern that family members might somehow learn of the program, you think, and might conceivably make public their worries about its safety.
Yeah, now you don't want that cat out of the bag. You know, that would have... Can you imagine? Okay, well, we can't... All these people involved, you'll never get this thing off the ground.
Well, you would have to separate those family members and not let them in public.
Even the... and they'll talk about this later, of the 12 people, and they... one of the people decided that they didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And again, so they threw in an alternate, but they told the person that didn't want to do it that they had to stay in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas prison.
Yeah, you'd be
until
isolated.
they got back. So he changed his mind. I guess I might as well just go. These 12 individuals would be entirely in the hands of another civilization on a planet in a distant star system, and the government had little or no leverage to ensure their safety. Their safety, of course, was highly problematic. This was a very dangerous mission, and the fate of the team was basically unpredictable.
You think?
Yes, very unpredictable.
I mean,
it's scary.
If they did all die, we would have no way of knowing whether it was accidental, so we couldn't retaliate against the Eben in our custody, nor we want to anger an alien race that had technology to invade the Earth. So you just, did they ever get there? We don't.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know. Did they die in transit? Did they get killed when they got there? Did they not, did they like it and just decide, we're going to set up camp here. We're not coming home.
Well, and the other thing is...
We're orphans.
They're going to mention this later also, but I like to jump in and throw this in. They're going to... What happened to these people? They, they disappeared. Even though they say they have no family contact, there was probably somebody, And this was kind of during the Vietnam War. This whole thing happened. So, by the time it actually got off the ground in 65 or 63, I will have to see. There was some changes in the dates. This was a delicate balance, but we had enough experience with the Ebens to feel confident that the team had a reasonable chance of survival and returning safely. So we had a huge amount of trust for these guys to take care of our people and then actually get them back to Earth, and then it'll be our problem again.
We basically had to learn to trust them, but this was to be the first time any human would be sent out into space beyond Earth's orbit. It was a grand adventure, really more appropriate to the realm of science fiction to that of reality. Yeah, really.
Hugely science fiction. And that's a discussion we've had about this whole story. Either a fantastic science fiction writer put this all together, which could happen. We've had a lot of... hi, Max. We've had a lot of stories that... we haven't had a lot of stories that we thought were fact were actually science fiction, but or vice versa. So, but it was worth the risk. If they all had, or even some of them, returned safely to Earth, we would have complete details about a civilization on a distant planet, which would be a window into the universe of incalculable value.
So, the call for volunteers was placed in military publications. Eventually, that's kind of interesting how I guess they just said vaguely we need volunteers.
Yeah, they didn't obviously say exactly what they were doing.
Want to go to another planet?
I think they said it was a moon. I think, as I remember, they said it was a mission to the moon or something.
So after some months, the final 12, 10 men, 2 women were chosen. There were 8 Air Force selectees, 2 Army, and 2 Navy. Additionally, 4 alternates were picked.
They would go through the same training as the main team, the alternates, in case a trainee was eliminated or dropped out. These 16 were the very best and most likely to complete the mission successfully. So if you dropped out, they just said they didn't really know what happened.
Yeah.
They just,
So relative to selection, the following quoted information came from someone in England who claimed to have been in MI6.
Yep.
the British intelligence agency, and was involved in the program. It was sent to the website and was not disputed by Anonymous.
The advertisement, which was sent out, asked anyone interested in volunteering for a space program to apply. It was semi-classified. I don't know what's. You're either classified or you're not.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
so I don't really know.
If you're putting
what
this
they mean.
in a publication, it's subject to getting passed around.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The disguise was that the U.S. Air Force was selecting a special team to travel to the moon, and these people must undergo special training and a special selection process. None of the military people trying out for the team knew the real mission.
About 500 people applied. That's pretty good.
That's a lot.
And that narrowed down to about 160, but there was a problem.
There's always a problem.
Some specialists required on the mission were missing. Besides, the requirement called for each team member to be single, never married, no children, and if possible, orphans. Any orphans out there?
Give me your orphans.
An orphan. The U.S. Air Force had to go out and recruit 2 doctors and several other specialists. So what they're saying, essentially, is those people didn't apply.
Right. Well, because...
or they didn't meet the criteria.
Doctors, not a lot of...
Not a lot of orphan doctors?
Well, no, because it's very expensive to go through medical school, so,
Yeah.
I think that's... the selection committee decided to completely dissolve the identities of all the team members and to assign them 3-digit numbers as their new identities. They wanted to sever all their existing connections to Earth except those with mission personnel, and that meant destroying all traceable identities.
Yeah, consequently, they call it sheep dipped, according to an article in Time magazine on February 3rd, 2003, titled The CIA's Secret Army by Douglas Waller. If a soldier is assigned highly clandestine work, his or her records are changed to make it appear as if he resigned from the military or was given civilian status. This process is called sheep dipping, after the practice of bathing sheep before they are sheared. And really, in this case, it wouldn't be just resigned, because that wouldn't fit.
No.
You have to make them disappear.
Just absolutely remove their identity.
Yep.
This metaphor is slightly askew. It is really the shearing and not the dipping that applies here. Identities are sheared off like the wool of the sheep. One suggestion was that they all be listed as dead. That was debated. Well, it would suck when they got back.
Yeah.
That was debated and rejected. It was finally decided they be shown on their official military records as missing.
Yeah, I mean, eventually somebody's going to, you get back 10 years later or whatever, and you'll at least try to look up a friend.
Right.
Somebody.
Yeah.
You, not everybody, but somebody's going to be looking up a friend.
Well, you're dead.
This thing's getting out.
Yeah.
You're dead. But even if this thing goes through as what it is, which it does, you're just going to go talk to her. Somebody's going to talk to somebody about this.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, is anonymous, which, again, going back to the previous episodes, this is someone we don't know who it is, but he's feeding this information through a person who translated it into the website. That seems like a very odd decision, since the missing category was only appropriate in wartime, when thousands of military personnel were listed as missing in action. In 1963, the Vietnam War had not yet begun. And I don't think this is entirely correct. I think the Vietnam War actually had begun unofficially before 63. It wasn't clear how the military would be able to explain how 12 people could be missing in peacetime. We can make a military person on active duty. He doesn't have to be in Vietnam to disappear.
Right. But there would be questions, as opposed to if somebody disappears during... Oh, great.
Yeah.
Maria's got her dog outside. How could members of the armed forces suddenly not show up for duty without being labeled as deserters? Stranger still was the decision to either destroy their military records or to place them in a secret storage facility.
That meant no investigator would ever know that they had been in the military. This means that they could never question the missing designation anyway. All other records were to be collected and destroyed or placed in a vault, like all the other UFO records, including Internal Revenue Service tax returns. medical records and any other papers that showed that these 12 individuals have ever existed. But my question is, how am I going to be paid? Now, I'm not doing this for free. You know
Well,
what I
I'm
mean?
assuming you'd be assigned a new identity when you got home.
Am I going to get back pay?
Well, there should be some kind of pay for leaving the planet.
Because, I mean,
But I mean, they'd have to set you up for when you got back
I
so that you weren't destitute.
it was never really discussed in here as I've seen. I'm further along in the book than we are right here. And I don't think it ever discussed this, what the pay arrangement was.
Interesting. That was really an impossible task since there were probably papers such as birth certificates, school and college records, social security cards that may not have been retrievable by the military. The purpose of all this strict depersonalization is obscure. Well, they're going to do the best they can. I mean, they can't do it all maybe, but they can still get rid of a lot.
The very fact that they can't get it all.
Yeah.
It would be less difficult than that it would be today to do this. Because today there's the internet and records
impossible.
about everything, everywhere. Look up your own name.
Yeah.
You know, look at your storied past when you look up your name on the internet of all the things.
Oh, yeah, there's so much about me.
Very possibly the committee wanted to prevent the writing of articles and books when the team members returned to Earth and were released to civilian life. The security oath alone should have accomplished that goal, but they weren't taking any chances.
Yeah, because we know oaths can never be broken.
Yeah,
By eliminating their credentials, the military made it easy to disavow such writings. They wanted the full report of that space travelers to remain under lock and key for as long as they chose.
Yeah, there could have been justifiable security reasons for this at the time, but now in retrospect, it seems a great shame that those 12 courageous space pioneers must forever remain in the dark halls of historical anonymity.
It is sad because, I'm sure they want to tell their story.
Well, because if you're going on an adventure like that, in the name of, humanity, basically, not just the United States.
Yeah.
That should be...
You should be celebrated.
And if true, this should really be brought to light. I mean, I hate to say it, I know you kind of giggle and things. But it's kind of like, if this were true, this really has to be brought out.
Yeah.
But it probably never be,
The final makeup of the team with their new 3-digit identities. We've lost our identity.
This is important now. Remember, you got to
Is
commit this to memory.
Lord, I
You
can't.
see, now there'll be a sign.
I can't remember anything. Team Commander 102, Assistant Team Commander 203. Oh, why can't he be 102 and 103?
Nope.
Why is it 203? Team Pilot number 1 is 225. Team Pilot number 2 is 308. Linguist number 1 is 420. These numbers do not make sense at all.
420.
Linguist number 2 is 475. The biologist is 518. These numbers do not make sense. Scientist number 1 is 633. Science number 2, 661. Doctor number 1 is 700. Doctor number 2 is 754. And security is 899. Why? Why wouldn't it be 101, 102, 103,
I would understand why they did this if they thought that there was going to be, it's kind of like your addresses at your house when there's a lot in between. But I don't know what they thought was going to be I don't know. They never explained the reasoning why they selected these numbers. And that was that would have been, doesn't really not necessarily to know, but I'm just kind of a curiosity, the whole thing. Why did they just not make them?
Well, those numbers are so random.
Yeah, it might be that the ones are based, a 1 is the most important, the 2 is second most important, 3, 4 is the fourth most important. It might be because of rank.
Yeah.
Literally, biologist, scientist. Well, the doctors should have been.
The pilots are 225 and 308. That's not, I would understand if pilots were in the 2s, linguists were in the 4s, but there are no 3s.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
In one of his emails, Anonymous answers some questions regarding the Serpo material that were sent in. One question relates to the selection process, and others some additional insight.
The question pertained to the team makeup. Why were only 2 females taken?
Yeah, and there's we'll be addressing that as well. If one considers the monumental program associated with picking a team of 12 people, where each person must be totally erased from the military system, no family ties, no spouses, and no children, one can see the difficulty that the selection group had. The selection group picked the best team members from a limited pool of military people. The original selection group picked 158 people. The final 12 were selected from that number. If you consider the psychological, medical, and other tests that had to be administered, the final 12 were the best qualified from the original number. Why they chose 2 females was never written. Apparently those 2 females were the best qualified in their individual specialty, a doctor and a linguist.
See, this would never fly today. Everything has to be even.
Yeah.
You don't pick because they're the best. You pick because they're what you need in that position.
Well, it kind of lends a little legitimacy to the story.
You know, it does.
That's how they acted back then.
That's the way back then. You just picked the best person. The primary training for the mission took place at Camp Peary, in Virginia, on the York River near Williamsburg. This is the not-so-secret main CIA training location, popularly known as the Farm. Oh, yeah, I've read about the Farm in a million murder books, yeah. But officially referred to as the Armed Forces Experimental Training Activity, AFITA. The project was assigned its own training complex within the larger facility where it could impose its own secrecy and security within the already highly secure CIA system.
Which uses, well, I kind of plugged in there what was its uses.
The CIA Directorate of Operations Officer Training and DIA Defense Clandestine Service. So it was necessary to go through 2 levels of screening just to gain access to this training location.
Yeah, I looked into it because I've heard of the Farm.
Yeah.
I said, what about this? So I kind of dug into it. So I plugged that in as an interesting addition to the information. Camp Peary was the was the home training site for the team, but they were also trained at Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas, Ellsworth Air Force Base outside Rapid City, South Dakota, and Dow Air Force Base in Bangor, Maine. They were given high-altitude astronaut training at Tyndall Air Force Base near Panama City, Florida.
Anonymous says they were also sent to unidentified locations in Mexico and Chile for special training. Camp Peary was a logical choice for training the team, primarily because it was self-contained and it was ultra-secure.
Since it was operated by the Defense Department, it was really a military base under the normal control of the U.S. Navy. It was named after famed naval explorer, Rear Admiral Robert E. Peary, who, in 1909, was the first man to reach the North Pole. Self-containment was important to the planners of the mission. They didn't want the team to make any connections outside their training facility where they might inadvertently drop a hint or reference to their mission.
No, we don't want that. Camp Peary already had pleasant homes and apartments, recreational facilities, and retail establishments for the CIA trainees that were easily adaptable for the team. Since it was previously a Virginia State Forestry and Game Preserve, the camp residents could even enjoy hunting on the 9,000-acre heavily wooded reservation in whatever spare time they were given.
I wouldn't want to leave and go do anything else. I'll just stay here.
I think you might need a break once in a while.
If I don't go, can I just stay here for 10 years and just do some hunting?
Oh, just stay in the forest? That would be nice.
Secrecy and self-containment had always been the major virtues of this facility throughout its history. During World War II, it was the main training camp for the Navy Seabees, and then it was used to house German prisoners of war, mainly officers, who were supposed to have been killed in action,
secretly held,
but had actually been rescued by the Navy. It's probably Project Paperclip.
So more missing people.
The not officers was probably where we brought in the scientists, possibly.
Consequently, the German High Command thought that they were dead and couldn't give away any information. The prisoners could live normal lives, real normal, securely at Camp Peary while they were being interrogated. Eventually, most became naturalized American citizens.
They got to hunt and fish and hang out, Well,
and be interrogated.
Wow. Well, I'm sure we were very gentle about it.
Yeah, I'm sure we
The Navy gave the reservation back to Virginia in 1946, but then took it over again in 1951.
Ha, fooled you. You thought you got it back.
The purpose of CIA training at the farm is to imbue desk-bound intelligence operatives with the paramilitary skills they would need in enemy territories.
Here, the keenly academic types are toughened up and made into pseudo. I don't want to be a pseudo soldier.
Well, it's kind of like you're an accountant.
But you're also James Bond. This kind of James Bond commando training was resumed after 9/11 by George W. Bush, after a long era of blunders by CIA paramilitary operatives in foreign countries who were in the Special Operations Group. The SOG.
SOG.
I love acronyms.
Waller says in his Time article, until fairly recently, the CIA isn't in an effort to clean up its reputation sullied by botched overseas coups
Wow.
and imperial assassination attempts, had shied away from getting its hands dirty. Until about 5 years ago, in 1998, it focused instead on gathering intelligence that could be used by other parts of the government. Deb.
Before that, traditional CIA officers, often working undercover as U.S. diplomats, got most of their secrets from the embassy cocktail circuit or by bribing foreign officials. Most didn't even have any weapons training.
Now, says Waller, at Camp Perry, new SOG recruits, SOG recruits, also hone their paramilitary skills like sharpshooting with various kinds of weapons, setting up landing zones in remote areas for agency aircraft, and attacking enemy sites with a small force. Now, it would be interesting. I was just thinking that, if they could have done this, I think they need to do one of those pre-series on James Bond where he was, in school and he was a nerd.
As we train James Bond.
No,
to be
but he started there. No, he's he's in high school. James Bond in high school.
Okay.
And he's just he's one of those nerds, the kind who's like read books a lot, and
Now they're going to make him into a...
Yeah, now they're going to make him into James Bond. They really need to, I think they need to show that,
I'm sure.
kind of like young Indiana Jones.
I think I've read books like that where they get some girl that's in college and, recruit her and make her into some, CIA person. This rebuilding of the Special Operations Group by CIA Director George Tenet required a makeover of the facilities and capabilities of Camp Perry, which started in 2001.
But by the mid-'60s, there had been some improvements as a result of the lessons learned in the Bay of Pigs debacle in '61. But those facilities were still rather primitive when the Serpo team was in training at the camp in between '63 and '65.
The complete training curriculum, according to Anonymous, is shown in Appendix 1. He claims to have received it from an associate named Gene. With a G. Email, you never know. Gene. Email moderator Victor Martinez provided Gene's last name, Laskowski.
I tried him in People Looker.
You can't find Anonymous, Anonymous tells us that Laskowski gave out these details of the training agenda because he wanted to beef up the released information with more specificity.
Yeah, they expected the completed program in about 6 months. It was a very ambitious program.
Passing of the coffee.
Yeah. It was an ambitious program. We find out from, again, Anonymous gave the information through Victor Martinez, who gave the information into the Serpo, was translated into the Serpo website. And you can check, but you can review a lot more information about Serpo, which a lot of this will be interjected into our discussions on serpo.org. And it's still open. I believe the last entry, that's where anybody could come in there and put anything on there that they knew. Mm-hmm. And I believe the last entry is on about 2014. So it might be something about the age of people or whatever. Expected to be completed in about 6 months. It was a very, we find out from an anonymous email to the website that it actually lasted about 8 months. The training was intense.
Yeah, you can't, I have to imagine doing that much training in only 8 months.
I'll tell you what, though, that is a long time to train for That's a long time to train.
Yeah, but there's a lot to learn.
But I know being in basic training, I think it's 6 weeks or something,
Yeah.
and that's squished. A lot of that is squished down into 6 weeks. It just seems like a long time to me.
Does it? It doesn't seem like much to me to learn a whole new thing. Anonymous says each team member had to demonstrate their abilities to endure hardship. Oh, so they abused him, which included a battery of psychological tests, medical screenings, and a PAT positive attitude test, which is a military test given to pilots and special forces personnel.
We should give that to you.
I don't know. I think I'd fail. I'm positive I would fail a positive attitude test.
Each team member had to endure extreme psychological and physical training. In one training test, each team member was locked. Oh, I don't like this at all. Was locked in a 5-foot by 7-foot box, buried 7 feet underground for 5 days with just food and water, no contact with anyone else, and in total darkness. No, first of all. And second of all, I thought about this. I go, okay, could I do this?
No.
And I'm like,
if it was light, maybe.
Knowing,
but in the dark,
I'd be less freaked out knowing that I'm going to get out of there at least at some point.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay, I'm going to put you in a closet in the dark for 5 minutes and see what happens. A little Kool-Aid man coming through the door.
As long as I got my phone, it's going to look like the door jam in the bathroom.
I said it would be the Kool-Aid man coming through the door. Don't talk about the bathroom that I broke.
Deb stepped off the back of the bed and missed a step.
I fell through a door. It was bad.
Well, it wasn't funny, but
I didn't.
Evidently, Max sees something. Evidently, candidates with any tendency towards claustrophobia had been weeded out in the selection process. Otherwise, for anyone with such tendencies, this ordeal would definitely have caused the trainee to break. I don't know how anybody would be okay with that.
Oh, no.
Apparently, all the team members passed this test. It does seem logical to have imposed a claustrophobic stress test on the team, since they had to be prepared to be cooped up in the alien spacecraft for an extended journey to Zeta Reticuli, and it wasn't known in what sort of living quarters they would be ensconced.
Ensconced?
Well,
that's very fancy.
Interesting word on Serpo. I mean, as it turns out, I've read it ahead, and it was very open, and the ship is gigantic, so they didn't.
So there was no reason to lock you in a
no,
box
but they
for
didn't
5
know.
days.
They didn't know what type. They didn't ask. I mean,
yeah.
I guess we didn't say, hey, what kind? We just, in case we knew that these guys could handle it.
It's just fun to torture.
Wouldn't want them to freak out in the first 5 minutes there.
Mission over. A section of the Serpo website invited comments from anyone who had direct knowledge about Project Crystal Night, but preferred to remain anonymous. Many emails were received that confirmed all the basic facts about this remarkable journey.
Project Crystal Night is the actual military name for this project. Mm-hmm. I mean, the author, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo, that's the name of what they did, but the official military designation for this was Project Crystal Night. So, regarding the training at Camp Perry, this letter basically authenticated the story revealed by Anonymous. The writer says,
I was involved in Project Crystal Night from about 1960 until 1965. I was assigned as a civilian to this project. I was a CIA employee with a specialty of survival in a foreign environment. I was a training instructor at the CIA training camp in Virginia. I trained the 12 men and no women who went on this mission.
Having women there, I mean, I don't myself care either way, but it creates an interesting dynamic. Mm-hmm. If there's 2 women and 10 men, as you could probably imagine, what might...
Yeah, for 10 when they're, to be gone for a minimum of 10 years, there's going to be...
But women, men, women. Well, it could happen with guys, just all guys too.
But women,
it's
I mean, I would assume, did they sterilize these women?
Yeah, I think at the end game there is that they didn't send the women. I think they sent just 10 men. Okay. But as I read through the diary, later on we'll be discussing the diary after they actually land during the trip there, and what they did while they were there. Yeah, it doesn't feel like and I'm reading into it. I'm like, is this something that could happen if there's women and they didn't? There was no, so far, there hasn't been any, because, guys in the 60s, they're going to write and they're probably going to put in there something about the women. That's how that was their thought process in the 60s. They didn't involve like we have now. They're going to put the woman this or that. You know what I mean? There would be some indication that there was something there other than a man. So I'm looking for that to see if there's any indication. I'm not yet seeing it.
Okay.
They spent about 8 months at the training facility. Few knew their exact mission, and it was classified top secret code word, which is the style. I had no other involvement with this mission after 1965. I was very surprised to hear this story come to light after all these years. The no women interjection in this email contradicts the claim by Anonymous that 2 women were part of the original team. There has been other testimony on both sides of the issue, and it remains contentious. It is possible that the 12 trainees referred to here consisted of 10 original team members and 2 male alternates. But later on, they said there were women. I mean, later on, it's been described also that there were women, in the weeding out process, and there were alternates, but they weren't selected.
The following email helps to clarify the contradiction. The Project Serpo information that I just read is not totally correct. There were 2 women in the original 16 selected for training. I helped train the team, including the 2 women. But after the final selection process, which did not involve any combat training like what was mentioned on the website, the 2 women were dropped from the list.
Again,
we don't know.
We don't really know. I mean, again, don't have a problem with whoever goes, but it would be an interesting dynamic. And you could get, kind of, I hate to say it, kind of love triangle things.
Oh, yeah.
And
there's so many.
Could happen with guys, too.
Yeah.
So it's, it'd be interesting. So I guess it really does. But you would have to sterilize them, probably.
Yes, because you do not want pregnant women traveling through space.
Yeah. Or, on another planet, maybe, or I don't know. It would be an interesting dynamic if that would have happened. During the training, the team members didn't know their actual assignment. When the final cut was made, the 12 selected were sent to a military prison, probably Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and then told of the assignment. The 12 are isolated from that point on. The 12 are removed from the payroll. Oh, darn, they're not paid.
Nope, no more pay.
Payroll of the government and placed on a special file within the Defense Intelligence Agency. And the DIA, according to this, the DIA is the Kennedy Agency is what's driving this.
Yeah, the DIA agency was the controlling agency in Project Crystal Knight, which was the name of the operation. However, the following email keeps the controversy alive. Gotta keep that alive. I congratulate and commend you for getting this very important piece of America's hidden history out. I really enjoyed reading this information. I just shared it with many of my old Intel friends, and they all knew about it. It's truly an amazing story, all of which is fact. I guess there still is a controversy on whether 2 women went or not. At least one woman went for sure. I knew 6 of them while in training as their instructor. 2 were nurses. 1 was a linguist, and I'm not sure about the others with the passage of time.
Yeah, again,
you'd forget this. This is pretty memorable.
Yeah, as discussed in previous chapters, we had at least 1 intact Eben craft in our possession. Anonymous makes mention of the one that crashed in the plains of St. Augustine in western New Mexico. He claims that this craft collided with the Corona disk on July 4th, 47, but limped on westward and finally came down near Datehill, but wasn't discovered until 49. This discovery date was disputed by other Roswell witnesses, but all agree that the disc was virtually undamaged. Well, it crashed. All the Ebens inside were dead, and it was, well, the story I got, the story I didn't personally get, the story I understand, is that it was open to the point where animals were able to get inside and get to the Ebens.
The Ebens got chewed up.
And they got chewed up and brought out, and they were dismembered by the animals, not by anything else.
Coyotes.
Yeah, something like that. So that disputes what they just said, that it
Right,
was
that was-
intact, or it was intact enough for them to use it, even though animals got in. I don't know.
It was sent to the Wright-Patterson Foreign Technology Division, headed by Eric Wang, for analysis and reverse engineering. The seriously damaged Corona craft was also shipped to Wright-Patterson. At that time, Area 51 was not yet in existence. However, after it became operational, both discs ended up there.
Yeah, we learned from Anonymous that the training plan actually contemplated a possible emergency escape contingency. He says several selected team members, pilots, were trained on flying an Eben craft. One of them was the one captured near western New Mexico in 1949. The plan called for these selected few to fly the craft back to Earth in case of an emergency. Unfortunately, the craft that they were trained to fly were they're not interplanetary.
No.
Those craft they're carried by a mothership.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
You
So
can't fly that and survive, probably.
you need to get just to the mothership.
Yeah,
that
so
would then...
it's a 10-month journey, first of all. So I don't know if you know what I mean? It just,
Yeah.
in any case, it doesn't really make sense.
There were 4 pilots on the team: 102, 203, 225, and 308.
You were supposed to know those numbers. This is going to be a test. Next time it comes up, you're going to have to tell me what their numbers are.
Oh, God. These 4 spent many weeks at the Nevada complex learning to fly the recovered Eben alien craft. You can just see this thing flying around. It wasn't hard to fly. Once one could understand the operations of the controls, yeah. I'm sure many of the UFO sightings back in 64, 65 around the West could be attributed to these test flights by our team members.
Yep, saw UFO.
It was not doing well.
In this reference to the St. Augustine craft, Anonymous implies that we had more than one flying Eben craft in our possession. The other one could only have been that disc that was delivered to us at Kingman, Arizona on May 21st, 1953, and was hauled on a tank carrier over the road to the Nevada test site. This is a masked reference to Area 51, which was fully functional by that date, and had now become the major facility for the reverse engineering and flight testing of all recovered alien craft. But Bob Lazar was there, and he told us exactly what happened.
Bob knows. The belief that our pilots would be able to fly an alien aircraft 40 light years from Zeta Reticuli back to Earth was a very naive supposition based on lack of knowledge of the scientific principles involved at that time. Apparently, in 1964, nobody in the military-industrial complex had yet conceived the possibility that covering such vast distances could only be achieved by time travel through wormholes. God.
Nobody's allowed to go out into the neighborhood.
Walk down the street, get barked at.
It seems highly unlikely that human pilots would have been able to comprehend that sort of technology in that era. Even Star Trek, which debuted 2 years later in 1966, did not mention time travel, but referred to warp drives. It wasn't until the advent of Star Wars in 1977 that the term hyperspace, basically a synonym for the time domain, gained popular currency.
The Eben discs in our possession were only small scout craft. They were not meant for long-distance interstellar journeys. Since we had not yet seen the larger craft when the training took place, it is understandable how this judgment error could have occurred.
Another email testimony confirmed the training at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida and the fact that no women were in the final team.
And we just debate this
back and forth.
Were there, weren't there?
Evidently. Well, it's interesting because, people are weighing in on this.
Yeah.
And even, except for maybe they got the, story and they're just weighing in. They don't know anything. But in order to make it seem like they were there, maybe they weren't. Who knows? But evidently the Tyndall training took place after the final 12 had been selected.
Okay, who am I? We're still this person. My father died in 1995. Yeah. He was retired from the U.S. Air Force. In 1990, he told me a story about a special mission that he was involved in back in 1965. He told me that this mission was about 12 military astronauts that went to another planet in a spaceship that was found in the New Mexico desert.
Yeah, but we know it wasn't done in that spaceship. But maybe that's the story he was told,
Right.
you know, or because they didn't have any information. His father wouldn't have had the. He assumed that was, you know what I mean. Many for a long time, many have assumed that all these things we see flying around and that are crashing all over the place in New Mexico and everything, that these are the things that came from the, the across the galaxy, across the universe, which all these things aren't really, unless they can go through wormholes and things. They're probably not the actual craft. They're probably in a mothership. He said the 12 men were trained at Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida, where he was stationed. He helped train the 12 in space endurance, which he was trained to do. He said the 12 left in 1965 and came back in 1978, and he was there to check them after they returned to this earth.
Oh, wow. I didn't know what to think about my dad's story. Back then, I just listened to him and thought maybe he was all just making it all up. But now I realize he was telling the truth. It's too late for my father to know about this, but I know my father was being truthful to me, and that makes me feel good. I look forward to reading more about this incredible story.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But so he was there when it got back, but yet he still thought that those craft were the ones that went all the way across the universe.
Well, they didn't bother to tell him those facts.
Since this email describes the last training component for the remaining 12, I believe that it is safe to conclude that the final team composition consisted, whether they're hung up on how many men and women are on this thing,
to death,
consisted entirely of men. Well, they're trying to undo what could have happened. Tyndall Air Force Base was originally an air gunnery training base during World War II, hosting Allied as well as American pilots.
Oh, one of its famous alumni was Clark Gable, who graduated in 1943. After the war, Tyndall became a general air weapons training facility and officially became an air training command base in 1950. In 1957, it became part of the Air Defense Command, which is responsible for defending the continental United States and its territories.
In 1964, when the Serpo team went there, it had already begun training airmen for high altitude and space operations. And then in 1968, the Air Defense Command officially changed its name to the Aerospace Defense Command.
As mentioned above by one of the trainers, during the training, the team members didn't know their actual assignment. When the final cut was made, the 12 selected were sent to a military prison, and then they were told of their assignment. I guess once you're in prison, you ain't getting out, right?
No.
One can imagine the reaction of the trainees to this revelation. We're going where?
I'm surprised more of them went, nah, I'm not doing that.
Well, then you have to stay in
we
prison.
We have a different type of person than we do today. It's like we're not really fighting an enemy, but it depends on if you wanted to be an adventurer. I mean, the adventurer like Christopher Columbus. Certainly, they could not have imagined such an assignment in their wildest dreams, even though some of the training might have suggested some sort of exotic mission. And then, after all they had gone through, to be confined to Fort Leavenworth, Texas.
Kansas.
They moved from Texas. Must have added insult to injury. I should know that.
You know that fact.
I know that fact.
There was no doubt an attempt to imbue the team with pride and to stimulate a feeling of the heroism of their mission and the glory they could anticipate.
But yet. They must have nevertheless been shaking in their boots. They knew the promise of glory was a fiction, and all that they could look forward to was a tremendous hardship and an early anonymous death on a distant planet.
Jeez.
Or a long-term isolation to keep them from revealing what they knew. It's like, are they going to kill?
I know.
How
is this going to end? Are they? Yeah, because you'd think,
they didn't have the distrust in the government that they do today.
The safest way to keep somebody from talking.
Yeah.
So it is not surprising that one of the team members asked to be excused. He changed his mind when he was told that he would have to remain at Fort Leavenworth until the team returned in 10 years. Yeah, that's not really...
Yeah, never mind.
Not really a fair out.
In December 1963, Los Alamos received a message from the Eben planet, confirming all the details of the landing. The message specified the time, date, and the location that had previously been agreed to. All the numbers were stated using our location, time, and date protocols.
The message told us that 2 even spaceships were already on their way and would arrive on schedule. Your flight is in progress and will be on time. We learned later that the journey took about 10 months, so that means the Eben spacecraft had been en route from Serpo for about 6 months of Earth time when the message was received. Oh, look, they left early.
President Kennedy had been assassinated only a few weeks earlier, so he wasn't able to revel in the arrangement that he helped put together. And the entire nation was still in mourning at that point. Some of the DIA project coordinators wanted to cancel the exchange program. The fate of the mission was then left to President Lyndon B. Johnson.
Well, they're already on their way here, so, unless we refuse to go with them.
We can just say no.
We're
not doing it.
We refuse to board. Johnson was briefed by the mission planners and made the decision to continue with the exchange, although we are told in a side note by Anonymous that the president really didn't believe that it would happen. Oh, another skeptic.
Yeah. Well, and he was in charge. He was Lyndon, Johnson Space Center. He was in charge of the space program back then, and you'd think he would want that. But maybe he just wanted to do it with what we do with all this, smoke spewing, flame shooting, rockets like we have today.
Rockets that destruct.
They completely destroy a launch pad today. But I don't know. It is interesting to note here that apparently President Kennedy had not informed then President Johnson about Project Crystal Knight. This is surprising because Johnson had been appointed by Kennedy to be the head of the Space Council.
Evidently, Kennedy had been told by MJ-12 that the project information could not be shared with Johnson or with the president's cabinet. As the landing date approached, the team was ready and idle and probably enjoying some well-deserved rest and recreation while they remained under surveillance the whole time. Yeah, at prison.
They probably, I don't think they have any good parts of
Fort Leavenworth.
No. Their training had been completed, and they had been given a 15-day vacation. In the time just before the April landing date, they were sent back to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas and were confined in locked cells in the U.S. disciplinary barracks and kept under close watch. So what did they do for vacation?
So they let them go and then brought them back.
There's no way they let them go.
You don't think they just go back to take a trip to Hawaii?
No way. It was like that. Yeah, you'll get a little R&R for 15. Half of them probably wouldn't even come back.
Just run away. This reflected the most fanatical dedication to secrecy by the planning committee. They were simply not taking any chances, no matter how remote, that information about the impending mission might be revealed.
One can easily appreciate how depressed the team must have been to have been treated like criminals on the eve of what should have been a grand send-off on a historically momentous and an extraordinarily journey to the stars. In another time, under a different, less paranoid government, if there is such a thing, they might have been sent off to the strains of patriotic music, broadcast on international television, and with a cheering crowd in audience.
In attendance. Yeah.
Not in attendance.
The 2 alien craft entered our atmosphere on the afternoon of April 24th, 1964, right on schedule. These were not scout craft, but were much larger and were considered shuttlecraft. The first ship missed the rendezvous point and landed somewhere near Socorro, New Mexico. This was about 100 miles north of the planned landing site.
We sent a message to the craft that it had landed at the wrong place.
Oops.
The second ship picked up the message and made the navigation correction. It landed shortly thereafter at the precise designated location at White Sands, where a greeting party awaited. It can be assumed that it was late afternoon at that point, although it could have been nighttime. It was shown in the movie Close Encounters, as it was shown in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Are we stopping?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Since we don't know where Steven Spielberg obtained his information, we don't know how accurate it was. Well, he didn't mean it to be a documentary, but it was distinctly possible that night had fallen by the time the alien craft had landed, and presumably the planning committee was prepared for that contingency with appropriate lighting, as in the movie.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up here, and that's installment number 4. And again, here's the book. If anybody wants to pick the book up and read ahead. Secret Journey of Planet Serpo. If I remember, you'll not have our wonderful interjection and our ideas and
it doesn't
opinions.
come with our sidebars. No, that's not in the book.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Alien Probe Podcast. We welcome comments, questions, or requests to alienprobepodcast@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook. Check out our website, alienprobe.net. It has all our episodes on there. Twitter and Instagram at Alien Probe Pod. Like and subscribe at YouTube, Alien Probe Podcast. Thanks to Deb for joining me again.
Thank you, Doug.
And we are going to wrap it up, and we'll see episode 5 coming up. See you then.
All right.
Thank you. 1 hour even.
Good. We got our time in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Max, for barking through it.
Yeah. Matt cracks up. He goes, "Oh yeah, I like it when Max is there."
Oh, great. Yeah, we all love it. Hi. What have you been doing? You been barking? You barking at the neighbors? I don't know how they think it's okay to just walk around in their front yard. That's pretty rude, huh?
Ooh, we made it with 2 pages to spare.
Oh, good. Yeah, we could have gone longer if you wanted.
Now I like to we'll stretch it out. People are listening to it by episode, so we'll see how it goes. Bless you.